The sun shines brightly over the imperial palace as a carriage arrives, carrying a beautiful young woman who looks thrilled to be there. Beside her sits the Empress, whose forced smile barely hides her displeasure. It's no surprise, after all, the young woman is her husband's lover. A few days ago in the human-beast empire, the Empress sat with her maids, reflecting on the fact that 5 years had passed since she arrived, yet the Emperor's name had not been engraved on her body. As she prepared for the day, a young girl burst into the room, breathless, announcing that a woman with the Emperor's name engraved on her had appeared. The news stunned the Empress completely. The Empress and the Emperor sit together for a meal. As they eat, he suddenly brings up his lover, Titi. With a somber expression, the Empress gently asks him to talk with her first since it has been so long since their last conversation. "Did you sleep well last night?" she asks, hoping to shift the mood. But instead of answering, he continues speaking about the woman who bears his name engraved on her body. Though the Empress feels hurt by his disregard, she forces a smile and suggests he engrave the woman's name onto himself as well. He dismisses the idea and notes her discomfort with the situation. She doesn't deny it. As the Empress, how could she not be bothered? After a brief silence, the Emperor stands and leaves the table. Left alone, the Empress breaks down, tears streaming down her face. She recalls her childhood with the Emperor, a time filled with unforgettable moments. She remembers when he wished to have her name engraved on him and taught her that a soulmate's name would naturally appear on one's body. She had dismissed it as mere legend, but he explained that for beasts, the engraving was a sign of destined love. Still, she remained skeptical. After all, she was human. But he had reassured her, promising that her name would appear on him regardless, because she was his only fate. Lost in these memories, she sobs quietly. Just then, Titi enters the room, her voice laced with amusement as she remarks that the Emperor only ever talks about her, perhaps because she has his name. With a wry smile, she asks if the Empress has ever seen the engraving. Then, as if her words weren't enough, she pulls down the neckline of her dress, revealing the Emperor's name etched onto her skin. With a smirk, she adds that she didn't expect it to appear in that spot either. Titi approaches the Empress and leans in close, whispering that she shouldn't worry anymore because she'll take care of warming the Emperor's bed in her place. Without waiting for a response, Titi walks away. The Empress stands frozen, trying to make sense of the remark, when the Emperor enters the room with Titi in his arms. He shows her affection openly, leaving the Empress to watch in silence. Gathering herself, the Empress asks him why he has returned and if there's anything more he wishes to say. Just as the Emperor begins to respond, Titi cuts in, claiming she's tired and needs rest. Without hesitation, he turns away from his wife and leaves with his lover. Unable to sleep, the Empress decides to take a walk late at night. Her mind is weighed down by the hostility she has endured from her husband and his lover, but she remains resolute in upholding her role as Empress. As she wanders, a sudden gust of wind snatches her jacket, leaving her exposed to the cold. To her surprise, a man appears and drapes his jacket over her shoulders, cautioning her about the chilly night. She looks at him, startled, and asks who he is and why he's there. He explains that he lost his way while wandering through the imperial palace and asks her to guide him back. From the way he speaks, she realizes he doesn't know her identity as the Empress. With a steady gaze, she agrees, adding that she wants to repay his kindness for the coat. As they walk together, she silently studies him and notices the scars on his hand, making her wonder if he's someone who fought in the recent barbarian subjugation. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she asks. He introduces himself as Roxanne and, before parting ways, politely asks her to return the coat the next time they meet. From his manner and presence, she deduces that he is a guest invited to the victory celebration. When she returns to the palace, her maid greets her with worry over her sudden disappearance. She glances, apologizes and reassures her, explaining that she only went out for a short walk. While lying in bed, she finds her thoughts drifting to Roxanne. His presence lingers in her mind, so different from her husband, Demios. Unlike the emperor's domineering aura, Roxanne exudes a calm strength, and with his black hair and golden eyes, he seems like someone from a foreign empire. The next day, during a meal, the emperor repeatedly accuses her of pushing his lover, Titi. Despite her firm denials, he presses the matter, dismissing her protests. After a brief argument, he declares the incident insignificant since Titi is unharmed, but the Empress refuses to let it go. She insists the accusation is baseless and unfair. When the Emperor continues to focus on Titi's claims, she demands evidence of her supposed offense and points out how he never considers her perspective. His response cuts deep. He sees no reason for Titi to lie to him. Anger and disappointment flare within her. Rising from her seat, she asks sharply, "Your Majesty, do you truly believe there's no reason?" Without waiting for a reply, she leaves the table, leaving him to sit alone in silence. At night, she visits the lake, mourning her husband's absence and mistreatment, when Roxanne suddenly appears behind her. She quickly stands and tells him the area is reserved for royalty, but he asks her to keep his presence a secret. He explains that he arrived there while following the autumn leaves and suggests they see them together. Confused, she asks what he means, and he replies that good things are better shared with friends. He adds that, having recently returned from the battlefield, he feels lonely since he knows no one there. He proposes they become friends, noting it's their second meeting. She agrees, but reflects that true friendship would require her to reveal her identity and stop deceiving him. She then suggests they be honest with each other. As Roxanne begins to respond, a voice interrupts, calling out to the Empress. She turns, wondering why Titi is in her palace and realizing Roxanne must have figured out her identity. Titi explains that the Emperor told her to explore the castle and let him know if she finds any place she likes, which led her to the lake. She admires its beauty and suggests it would be perfect to plant camellias in winter and cherry trees in spring. The Empress quickly declines, explaining that the area is behind her palace and is only accessible to royalty. Smirking, Titi sarcastically asks if the man with her is also of royal status. Roxanne calmly replies that he's just her friend. Not satisfied, Titi presses further, asking what they're doing there. Roxanne responds that they were simply taking a walk, but Titi boldly asks to join them. Once again, he politely refuses her company. Undeterred, she shifts the conversation to their relationship, insinuating they are lovers. Her suggestion shocks them both into stunned silence. The Empress meets Titi's gaze with a stern expression and firmly states that her friend is not her lover, making Titi's earlier remark an insult. Titi quickly apologizes but hesitates, asking again if they're truly not lovers while looking at Roxanne. "I don't know, if you see yourself as a mistress, that's your problem," he retorts sharply. Tears welling in her eyes, Titi apologizes again and excuses herself. Once she's gone, the Empress turns to Roxanne and asks if he knew Titi is the Emperor's mistress. He replies that everyone in the capital has heard the rumors. She warns him that the Emperor's favor toward Titi is immense, and by openly confronting her, he risks making himself a target. With a playful smile, Roxanne asks if she's worried about him, and before she can answer, he teases again, asking if she'd protect him as a token of their newfound friendship. She meets his gaze and affirms with a soft smile. As the night grows late, Roxanne decides to leave, mentioning that they'll see each other again at the victory celebration. The next day, as the Empress walks through the palace, she overhears a group of ladies whispering. When she confronts them, demanding to know what they're discussing, one of them tells her that the barbarian suppression force still hasn't returned to the capital. Surprised, since they had arrived over a month ago, the Empress asks why. The lady explains that they're still camped outside the capital gates, awaiting the Emperor's orders. Puzzled, the Empress wonders why her husband would issue such a command, especially since the suppression force are the heroes of the upcoming victory celebration. Determined to find out, she decides to ask him directly. Just as she prepares to head to the Emperor's chambers, a maid arrives to inform her that he's already waiting for her in the drawing room. When the Empress enters the drawing room, she finds the Emperor standing, facing the window. Concerned, she asks why he's not sitting and if something's wrong. He turns to her, his expression serious, and mentions that Titi told him she saw her with another man at the lake. Unfazed, the Empress casually asks if Titi cried and claims she was insulted again. The Emperor cuts her off, asking what kind of relationship would involve a meeting at the lake, wondering if they were having a secret rendezvous and got caught by his lover. Trying to defend herself, the Empress insists that the man she was with is just a friend, but the Emperor remains skeptical. After a brief silence, the Empress pleads with her husband to rescind the order for the suppression force to wait. He coldly responds that it's not something she should involve herself with, but she insists that they are her people as much as they are his. She adds that, despite any tensions between him and Duke Leopold, the suppression force are heroes who've sacrificed for the empire and deserve fair treatment. The air around him shifts, and his brows furrow in irritation. He warns her to mind her own business. As the tension rises, the Empress notices that despite all the windows being closed, his hair is moving, an unmistakable sign that he is shifting into his beast form. Angrily, he snaps at her to do as she wishes and storms out of the room. As he leaves, her maid enters to check on her, and the Empress orders her to send a messenger to the East Gate to inform the suppression force that they are granted entry into the capital. By her authority, she'll ensure they have a place to stay. Alone, her thoughts shift to Roxanne. She wonders how he managed to enter the palace and eventually concludes that he must be part of the suppression force as well. In the next scene, a soldier announces to his comrades that the gates are now open. One of the soldiers, still in disbelief, approaches and asks if the gates have truly been opened. The first soldier replies, saying the Emperor has finally come to his senses. Another soldier quickly warns him not to speak so carelessly, especially now that they're entering the capital. Insulting the royal family before the victory celebration could get them arrested. As they continue their banter, they suddenly realize that Lord Roxanne is nowhere to be seen. Just then, Roxanne strides in with his usual majestic presence. The commander, surprised, asks where he's been, then informs him that the gates have just been opened. Roxanne casually responds that he's already aware, having just come from there. The commander adds that the Emperor finally decided to open the gates, but then Roxanne clarifies that it wasn't the Emperor, but rather the Empress, who gave the order. With a determined expression, Roxanne looks at his subordinates and confidently assures them that the Emperor will surely regret his decision. As the commander of the suppression force, he commands them to return to the capital, causing the soldiers to cheer in excitement. On the day of the victory celebration, the Emperor and Empress walk down the grand hallway, all eyes on them. The Empress silently reflects that this is the first official event since her husband took a mistress, and the people must be wondering how much distance has grown between them. Her gaze lands on Titi, who sits in a seat reserved for royalty, and she decides to compose herself. She won't let anyone see that something is troubling her, not in front of so many people. As the celebration continues, an announcement echoes through the hall, the entrance of the commander of the suppression force and the hero of the victory celebration, Duke Claude Leopold. The crowd gasps in awe as he enters, and in that moment, the Empress realizes with a start that the man before her is none other than her new friend, Roxanne. As she tries to make sense of everything, the Empress wonders if Roxanne had deliberately concealed his identity as a duke. Before the Emperor, Roxanne kneels and formally reports the suppression force's achievements on the battlefield. His incredible success sparks murmurs among the gathered nobles and officials, their whispers filled with admiration and praise. The Emperor acknowledges his accomplishments and, as a token of victory, asks what reward he desires. To everyone's surprise, Roxanne requests a blessing from the Empress. The Emperor immediately suggests he seek a priest instead, but Roxanne calmly counters, explaining that the one who bears the Star of Ishtar is akin to a saint of the empire, fully qualified to bestow blessings. It is widely believed that if a woman marked with the Star of Ishtar marries, she will bring about the revival of the Beast Empire. Because the priests once declared the Empress to be the Star of Ishtar, the Emperor had chosen her as his wife. And now, Roxanne, too, seeks her blessing. She agrees, though inwardly, she hesitates. She has never blessed anyone before. Yet, for some reason, she feels as though, for him, she can. The Empress rises from her seat, placing a gentle hand on Roxanne's shoulder as she begins the blessing. As she speaks the sacred words, she recalls his confession of loneliness and, moved by the memory, she grants him freedom from it. When the blessing is complete, Roxanne takes her hand and presses a kiss to it. The unexpected gesture leaves her momentarily stunned. A short while later, the ball begins, opening with the traditional first dance between the Emperor and his bride. As they move together, he leans in and whispers, asking if her lover is present. Frustrated, she reminds him once again that she has no lover, but he simply remarks that she shouldn't get too close to Duke Leopold. "Why shouldn't I?" she snaps, anger flaring in her voice. She warns him that he has no right to dictate who she associates with and then pointedly suggests they end the dance early. Before the tension can escalate further, Titi quickly steps in, her voice laced with concern as she notes that they don't look well. The Emperor, however, brushes it off with a reassuring smile, saying it's nothing. Moments later, the mood between him and Titi shifts, and they laugh together easily. Standing off to the side, the Empress watches in silence, wondering if the reason he favors Titi is simply because she makes him smile. A group of noble ladies approach Titi with warm greetings, engaging her in friendly conversation. Soon after, her parents arrive, showering her with praise and affection. Amidst the cheerful chatter, the other ladies shift their focus to Duke Leopold, admiring his striking appearance. They compare him to the Emperor, noting that while the Emperor's beauty is almost ethereal, more delicate than most women, the Duke exudes strength, the kind that makes women feel protected. Since both men share the blood of divine beasts, such comparisons are inevitable, and it's clear why the Emperor might be wary of Roxanne. As the conversation continues, one of the ladies casually mentions that the Emperor ordered the gates to be opened for the suppression force. Titi's father immediately seizes the moment to heap more praise upon the Emperor. However, to everyone's surprise, Titi interjects with a soft, humble smile, claiming that she was the one who requested the suppression force be allowed entry into the capital. The Empress, stunned, turns to glare at her, unable to believe how effortlessly she's lying with such an innocent expression. But Titi doesn't stop there. She goes on to say that the suppression force brought glory to the empire and that she simply wanted them to receive the honor they deserved, so she personally pleaded with the Emperor on their behalf. Before the Empress can respond, the commander suddenly bursts into the room, his voice cutting through the chatter. He announces that it was the Empress who ordered the gates to be opened. Turning to Roxanne for confirmation, he nods and, without hesitation, thanks the Empress for her kindness. But the commander isn't finished. He goes on to reveal that the Empress not only allowed them entry but also personally ensured they had accommodations. At that moment, Roxanne adds that even those who couldn't attend the celebration are deeply grateful to her. The atmosphere shifts as the noble ladies, who had been singing Titi's praises moments ago, now turn their admiration toward the Empress, the star of Ishtar. They marvel at how, since her arrival in the Empire of Beasts, there has been nothing but peace. They commend her charitable efforts, praising her wisdom and compassion for the people. Then, as if only just realizing, they shift their gazes toward Titi, their expressions filled with unspoken questions. Why had she lied so shamelessly? Trying to cover up her lie, Titi quickly responds that she simply assumed her request to the Emperor had already been granted. But before she can say more, the commander calmly interjects, remarking that the mighty son, the Emperor, would never be swayed by mere pillow talk. His words send a ripple of laughter through the crowd, leaving Titi frozen in humiliation. Sensing his daughter's embarrassment, Titi's father steps in to defend her, shifting the conversation by subtly belittling the suppression force. However, before he can continue, Duke Leopold speaks up, his voice firm as he questions whether he is calling his subordinates savages. The room falls silent as all eyes turn to the confrontation. Titi's father, realizing his mistake, flushes in embarrassment. Quickly, he bows slightly and apologizes for misspeaking before taking his wife's arm and retreating from the scene. Now alone, Titi turns to Duke Leopold, offering him a dance as an apology for her father's words. But with a polite yet pointed smile, the Duke declines. Instead, he states that he wishes to dedicate his first dance to the Empress, his benefactor. Then, turning toward her, he extends his hand and asks, "Will you do me the honor of this dance?" As they begin to dance, Duke Leopold leans in slightly and asks if she was upset that he hid his true identity. The Empress meets his gaze and replies with a small smile, saying that she, too, concealed her identity as the Empress, so they're even. He chuckles before clarifying that Roxanne is his real name, the one given to him by his mother. It's a name he treasures far more than Claude. With a sincere look, he expresses his hope that she will continue calling him Roxanne, as they are already friends. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, the Emperor watches them closely, his expression dark with rage and jealousy. His fists clench as he takes in the sight of Roxanne's hand resting firmly on the Empress's waist, their movements perfectly in sync. Later that day, in a quiet corner of the palace, the Emperor stands alone with Roxanne. His tone is smooth as he congratulates him on his victory and safe return. But what begins as a compliment quickly sharpens into something far colder. With a chilling smirk, the Emperor assures him that, no matter how much he wins, he will keep losing everything, because he is the Emperor now, and both the Empire and the Empress belong to him. With those final words, he turns on his heel and walks away, leaving Roxanne standing in silence. Meanwhile, in a private room, Titi and her parents sit tensely. Her father, still seething from the humiliation Duke Leopold dealt him in front of so many nobles, is smashing objects in his fury. His wife tries to calm him, urging him to compose himself, but he snaps at her instead, his frustration spilling over. As the argument escalates, Titi rises, gracefully inserting herself between them. With a sweet, soothing voice, she promises to speak with the Emperor and secure a better position for their family. Her words seem to pacify them, and before leaving, her parents eagerly list off their various demands. Though their endless requests irritate her, she maintains her ever-charming smile, concealing her annoyance beneath a carefully practiced expression. Now alone, Titi's carefully maintained facade shatters. In a fit of rage, she hurls several glasses across the room, the sound of shattering crystal echoing through the space. She curses under her breath, seething at her parents' endless demands. When the maids rush in to assess the damage, she turns her fury on them, snapping orders to clean up the mess she made. Then, without another glance, she storms out, instructing them to prepare the carriage, she's going to see the Emperor. Upon arriving at his chambers, the Emperor barely glances at her before asking why she's there. With a practiced pout, she explains that since he didn't come to her, she decided to come to him instead. Without waiting for permission, she settles beside him, her eyes subtly tracing the lines of his sculpted body. A wave of determination rushes through her, she will make him hers. She leans in, trying to bridge the space between them, but the Emperor interrupts, noting how she always acts so meekly around him, unlike someone else. Titi immediately realizes he's referring to the Empress. Her expression tightens for a brief second before she quickly softens her tone, responding that it's because he is the only one etched into her heart. Then, with a vow whispered like a plea, she promises to always be his gentle doe. Pressing herself against him, she watches him carefully, thoughts swirling in her mind. On the third day of the victory celebration, the grand hall buzzes with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. As guests dance and cheer, Empress Sephia stands quietly in a corner, lost in thought. She considers staying a little longer before leaving, especially since Roxanne isn't around, but quickly pushes the idea aside. Before she can dwell on it further, a nobleman approaches, requesting a dance. She barely has time to process his words when another man rushes in with the same request, then another. Confused, she glances around. Why are they suddenly acting this way? Then, from across the room, she catches snippets of hushed whispers. A group of ladies chat among themselves, their voices laced with intrigue. They say different men visit the Empress's palace every night. Sephia's breath catches. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, Titi stands with her friends, who are eagerly questioning whether the rumor is true. But the look on Titi's face tells a different story. She knows exactly how it started. She was the one who whispered it to her maid, knowing full well it would spread like wildfire. Now, feigning concern, she tells her friends, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't spread such words carelessly." The Empress would be upset if she heard. Her plan is falling into place. One of the ladies smiles at her, calling her kind-hearted, but Titi interrupts with a thoughtful sigh. If the rumor is true, then it's a relief. I've been worried that the Empress might be lonely every night because of me. At that moment, the conversation comes to an abrupt halt. Empress Sephia stands right before them, her expression unreadable, but the sadness in her eyes is unmistakable. A man suddenly pushes through the crowd toward the Empress, knocking over one of her maids in the process. The Empress quickly kneels beside the fallen maid to check if she's okay, but the strong smell of alcohol from the man makes her recoil. Standing up, she angrily asks if he just pushed her maid. He denies knowing the woman was her maid, then introduces himself as Gallard Louvre, Titi's brother. She demands he apologize to her maid first, but instead of obeying, he smirks and mentions hearing rumors that she invites different men to her palace every night. He even has the audacity to say that if she invites him, he won't be replaced. At his words, the Empress coldly states that she won't forget his insolence before turning to leave. When he tries to grab her, Roxanne suddenly appears, gripping his wrist tightly before smacking him. Gasps ripple through the crowd, but Roxanne remains unfazed. He steps toward the Empress, asking if she's hurt, but she assures him she's fine. He then brings up a strange rumor circulating about her. She responds that if she carries herself properly, it will fade, but he seems unconvinced. He warns her that rumors like this have already drawn rude men to her. Pulling her close, he offers a solution: she should use him. If he becomes her true lover and stays by her side, incidents like this won't happen again. Before she can fully process his words, the Emperor steps forward, watching her with jealousy in his eyes. The moment she notices him, she accepts Roxanne's offer, and together, they walk away. Later, they arrive at the garden, and the Empress asks why he brought her there. Roxanne replies that the night garden is a secret meeting place for lovers. She falls silent, lost in thought, wondering if they can really go through with this. Noticing her distraction, he asks what's on her mind. She hesitates before admitting that she's wondering if he already has a lover. If he does, accepting his help would be unfair to the lover. To clear things up, he explains that he once had a precious connection, someone he still loves, but they were forced apart by circumstances. Smiling, Empress Sephia gently tells him that his lover is waiting for him. He turns to her then, leaning in as if to close the distance between them, but before anything can happen, approaching voices interrupt their moment. Roxanne meets her gaze and pulls her closer, whispering that this is the perfect place to spark rumors. After all, they shouldn't let others take the lead. Still holding her close, he asks her to stay still for a moment, but their closeness makes her silently note how near they are. As they remain in each other's arms, the voices from earlier spot them and react with shocked murmurs. Realizing they've been seen, Empress Sephia remarks that the scandal will spread fast. Watching how gently Roxanne holds and cares for her, she can't help but wonder how much of it is just an act. Much later, they return to the palace hand in hand, stirring murmurs among the guests. Everyone finally accepts that the Duke is the Empress's lover, proving the rumors about her calling in different men every night to be false. Hearing the whispers around them, the Empress silently admits that Roxanne's plan worked perfectly, though the blatant stares feel a bit overwhelming. She suggests they move somewhere quieter, and he quickly proposes the balcony. Now seated alone, sharing a drink, she thanks him for his help and admits she worries he might be getting into trouble because of her. But he smiles and insists that he's the one who offered himself for the act, drawing the Empress into deep thought. She wonders why he helped her when it could easily bring him serious trouble. It can't just be because they're friends. Just as she's about to speak, the Emperor and Titi arrive. The Emperor remarks that she seems to be meeting people openly now. "Why should I hide?" she asks, and he responds by questioning whether she has any pride as the Empress, or if the Duke has already claimed her name as his own. She replies that she's simply trying to clear the vile rumors about her, to which the Emperor retorts that she couldn't have chosen a better tool than Duke Leopold. The Duke immediately steps in, explaining that he was the one who made the proposal first, because if he stood beside her, no vermin would dare to insult her. Then, fixing his gaze on Titi, he adds that the Emperor shouldn't bother investigating the source of the rumors, since the next scandal could target anyone. The moment Titi realizes the Duke's words were directed at her, she quickly complains that the place is too cold and suggests they go somewhere else. But before leaving, the Emperor says something unsettling. He tells the Empress to remember that everyone who's ever gotten involved with the Duke has met ruin. Once they're gone, Roxanne apologizes and asks to head back inside first, and she agrees. Still, she can't stop blaming herself for making him endure such cruel words from her husband. A few days later, as the Empress gets ready, her husband's words echo in her mind, and she can't stop wondering what he truly meant. Eager to know more, she asks the maid helping her about the Duke's past. The maid explains that although he's now celebrated as a hero, he was once a pitiable boy trapped by cruel rumors. The Emperor's father, Emperor Galuter, had an older brother, Prince Laximus, the Red King, and Duke Claude Leopold is his son. Though it's only whispered in secret, Prince Laximus was originally meant to inherit the throne. However, he gave it up, allowing his younger brother Galuter to become emperor. When Duke Claude was born, Empress Eurydice began to see him as a potential threat. One day, the Duke fell ill with a strange, unknown disease and was confined to bed. The maid continues, explaining that the Red King and his wife were fully aware of the Empress's wariness, so they lived quietly and cautiously, but in the end, both died in an epidemic. Shocked, Empress Sephia asks about Roxanne, and the maid replies that he had just returned from studying abroad, which spared him from the illness, but that, ironically, became his misfortune. The people of his territory began to suspect the heir who alone remained healthy. Before long, rumors spread that he had brought famine and disease upon them, and that the bloodline of the divine beast was cursed. Moreover, dead animals and strange symbols were found in the heir's room. When a maid first testified about it, the rumors were quickly accepted as truth. Still, the maid insists that the Duke she knows would never do such things and believes someone else must have framed him. The Empress agrees and thanks her for sharing everything about his past. Smiling, the maid assures her that no matter what kind of relationship she has with the Duke, she'll always stand by her, despite the Empress's flustered protests that there's nothing improper between them. In the midst of their playful exchange, a lady enters to announce that the Empress has a visitor. To her surprise, it's none other than Roxanne. Now sitting across from him, the Empress quietly studies his face, wondering how difficult his life must have been since childhood. Her thoughts are interrupted when he teases that he might start getting the wrong idea if she keeps staring at him like that. When she asks what kind of misunderstanding, he quickly changes the subject. She offers him tea, and their conversation begins to flow. He explains that he wants to borrow her map of the imperial palace, and when she asks why, he says he's searching for a hidden heirloom left by his late father. She agrees to lend him her copy, and he promises to check on it weekly to make sure it hasn't gone missing. Though the Empress insists that isn't necessary, he's clearly just looking for an excuse to see her at least once a week. And as if that isn't enough, he then suggests they take a walk together. As they stroll together, Roxanne suddenly points out a fox nearby, catching the Empress's attention. She wonders if it might be a beastkin, and if so, why a fully grown one would be wandering around alone. Seeing how cute and friendly it seems, she assumes it must be a lost pet. But when Roxanne reaches out to touch it, the fox growls at him, making him conclude that it only likes the Empress. With a playful grin, he adds that the fox probably sees him as a rival, and perhaps it's even a male. While Empress Sephia continues gently petting the animal, Roxanne steps closer again, only for it to growl once more before darting into the bushes. "I didn't mean to scare it," he says with a smile, "but it seems my rival has already fled." She remarks on how happy he looks, and he asks if she knows that even friends can feel jealousy. "Does that mean you're jealous of the fox?" she replies, half teasing. To her surprise, he admits it, saying he's jealous of the fox and hopes she likes him the most. Hearing that, she freezes, staring at him in stunned silence. Meanwhile, at the Crowd mansion, Jasper Crowd, the Imperial Guard captain and a fox beastkin, sits reading a book when his younger brother suddenly bursts in, completely naked, shouting that he's finally human. Clearly used to his brother's antics, Jasper sighs and tells him to get dressed first. As he helps him into a shirt, he admits he's glad for him but reminds him that he's been celebrating for hours already. Is it just happiness? Itenzel Crowd, the fox Suin, exclaims. He explains that everyone else could take human form from birth, but he couldn't transform until after 20 years, he's spent his whole life as a fox. Cutting him off, Jasper asks if he's about to bring up his encounter with the Empress again. Itenzel replies firmly that the Empress is the one who turned him into a human. That's not true, Jasper insists, but Itenzel doubles down, saying he's tried every potion, holy water, and superstition, and none of them worked until the Empress touched him. Still trying to convince his brother, he claims the Empress is a star of Ishtar who healed his curse and is destined for him. Then, out of nowhere, he asks Jasper if he's good-looking, declaring that with his appearance, the Empress will surely like him. Already exasperated, Jasper warns him to stop spouting nonsense and reminds him that the Duke is the Empress's lover. There's no way she'd ever be interested in him. Undeterred, Itenzel asks, "What if the Empress's name appears on my body? Just like how the Emperor and Titi became lovers after his name appeared on hers." Still trying to talk sense into him, Jasper reminds him that the Empress is human, no name will ever appear on him. But Itenzel refuses to listen, insisting that even if she's human, she's a star of Ishtar, born with the destiny of a beastkin. He admits that the moment he caught Roxanne's scent, he knew he'd be competing with her lover. As if that weren't enough, he then asks Jasper for a favor, to take him along the next time he visits the Imperial Palace, because he needs to meet the Empress in his human form.